Hello, and welcome back to Mirror's Signal podcast, your weekly podcast sponsored by Knowledgeability Instructor Training, award winning CPD providers. Stay tuned to the episode to get your discount code from them. In today's episode, we are joined by Sachin, an ADI, talking about his qualifying journey and then the CPD journey that he's been on as an ADI and some of the challenges with the job, working as a driving instructor, and how we can manage some of those either on lessons or affecting the business and accounts and finances. So it's not financial advice, but just things to consider if you are a driving instructor or if you're thinking about becoming a driving instructor. We also spoke a lot about the job and the challenges and are we client centered? What does that mean? How do we coach our learners? And where can we go for CPD? So, a varied episode with lots of great information. I hope you guys enjoy this one. If you've got any questions from me, just head over to the Facebook page or the Facebook group, both available at Mirrors Signal Podcast, or you can reach out in the comments section. So we'll get on with the episode. I hope you enjoy. Sachin, welcome to the show. How are you?
Very well. Thank you for having me, Josh. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for coming. And we've just been having a good chat discussing where the episode's going to go. But how have you been getting on? How's the day gone?
Yeah, today's day has been busy. I think it's one of my longer days today. So there's four pupils at 2 hours each. So yeah, it's I do love those. Start from nice and early morning at 7 o'clock, seeing the sunrise as well. Yeah, finishing off just for the evening. So yeah, it's been nice and busy.
Nice. And then you get to chat to me this evening. Let's hope you stay awake for the episode.
I'll definitely try. I tell you what, I love your fishes in the background, so that should keep me engaged.
Either that or it'll send you off in a trance, which is what it does with me. I don't watch TV anymore. I just watch them.
I'm all chilled out and relaxed. It's all good. It's all good. I'll be all right.
Good. And for anyone that's listening and not watching, we've got a fish tank behind me. So there we go. Get onto YouTube and give the video a watch. Um, so tonight we're going to be talking about your qualifying process and then some of the maybe challenges or frustrations that you've found since qualifying. But you were saying you've been qualified, or is it nearly 2 years since you was
Yeah,
became an ADI?
yeah. Sure. So nearly 2 years coming up in June. So that's been quite an interesting journey. I suppose just understand the process. I think the only thing I had to go on was the Gov website, which is full of lovely information. But yeah, I think my journey started in early 2023 now. God. And yeah, just trying to going through that whole process. Really interesting compared to some of the stories that I've heard. I started that, yes, I started for my part one in February, and I was qualified by October that same year. Where I know looking at things like Facebook groups and people take a lot longer in terms of because of test dates available or cancellation. So I count myself very lucky that I've been able to do that. But they've all come with, I suppose, lessons to learn from as well along the way. I think one of the funniest things I've ever done was with the part one. Thought, you know what, I can do this myself. It's only a theory test. It should be fine. Done it when I was 17. So yeah, downloaded the same app and yeah, had my theory ready for February. So I think 2 weeks up until like the actual test day, I've been revising the wrong one. Been driving the learner test for I think 3 weeks, and I've been getting 100%. I think brilliant. I'm really really on fire with this. Only when I looked read it, actually, there's a different ADI test you have to go through. So now I need to understand how there's four sections. What is the minimum requirement for those four sections? And totally different about I suppose well I say coaching in terms of how learners learn in terms of different techniques, what to do in situations. Those questions were new to me, so that was interesting. I think we talked earlier about just mentioned slightly about the terms of the matrix as well, the GDE matrix, and going to my theory test, my part one. I thought I'd take the train. It was quite early in the morning. Took the train. Trains were delayed. Great. Ended up taking an Uber in the end, just because of different modes, and I couldn't drive because I didn't have a car available at that time as well. I remember being late to the test center as well for the test. Literally bed my way in, and then luckily everything went as it should do. But that was panic all over from part one. But yeah, massive to anyone that's listening. Yeah, just make sure you're reading the right theory test, and not just the questions on the apps. Really go back and have a look at the literature, the Highway Code, Essentials Guide, things like that. I missed completely because I was none the wiser. Not really on social media at that point either, so I didn't really have those lovely Facebook groups that are available full of resources. But yeah, I think from part one perspective, it's there's limited information, and I think you underestimate how comprehensive it can be, rather than as a simple test of 100 questions, which I originally thought was 50 questions. Anyway, moving on from there. So, but yeah, the part two side of things, again, I thought brilliant. Got my part two in May. Been driving for 15, 16 years at that point. Should be a breeze. Got some coaching around that. Yeah, just found out I've been lucky all those years. I probably should have more accidents at that point. Just little things about being observant, and also being reliant on the tech in your cars. You've got your blind spot sensors, you've got your reversing camera, cars parking themselves. So I actually took a bit of a challenge. Actually, the vehicle that I used didn't have any of those lovely gadgets. No sensors, no blind spot no cameras, no blind spot sensors, nothing like that at all. Bulk standard old-fashioned car with a key. You even have to work out the fuel manually yourself through mental maths. So yeah, just to see what that looks like, because you forget about looking up the mirrors, looking over your shoulder. And just that road sense was absent in that part too. So that was quite interesting. I think I clocked over about 60 hours of personal practice, just to get to the standard where I thought, okay, you know what, you're going to be at least half decent to go for your attempt. That was quite good. But yeah, part three. Well, before, in terms of my career-wise, I was, I've been in management, senior management, been coaching, using different models for years. So I thought, yeah, you know what, just getting someone to drive and understand should be easy enough. And just starting from the knowledge side of things, your 40 hours that you do when you're trying to get your pink license, and again, all very just skimming things from the top. There's nothing that goes deeper. It's almost like the iceberg effect. You see a little bit on top, and until you start to work out what's deeper and deeper in that sea, opens your eyes. And I didn't find that out until I started teaching. I mean, the first day I sat with a pupil, really done the all the routines to every detail. Spent about a good half an hour, 40 minutes explaining, the cockpit drills and understanding about mirrors and storytelling. Didn't start moving till about 45 minutes in the lesson, just to move off and then park up again. So that was all fun and games, just because you don't really know what to expect from the pupil. But I think it's crazy when I did that. I didn't realise the person already had, I think, about 10 hours under the belt. So that was interesting. So I think they were being too kind to me. Like, did you know about how the centre mirror is a flat mirror and the other mirrors are slightly curved? And I didn't know that. I thought, brilliant. That's what 45 minutes gets you. Value for money. So yeah, I think it's from there to then understanding your pupil. And I think I mentioned about, not a big fan of the client-centered learning, kind of the word or the phrase. I think it's been diluted quite a lot to understand what that really means. But just from basic, when I first started the PDI, it's you're working with your pupil, and they are a pupil, and they're also your client. But a pupil, and you've got to nurture them. You've got to watch them grow. Sometimes you don't get the results straight away, but you've got to keep going. And I found my attitude changed quite quickly from That's obvious. Everyone knows how to turn a steering wheel round a corner. Actually, you don't. It's the first time someone sat in the vehicle. They've never sat on the driver's side. So that was quite interesting, especially from that. One of my first people was someone who commutes to London and back, and never sat on the driver's side. Always took an Uber, always got a lift, public transport. So I've gone from being really obvious to someone that's had 10 hours to then someone that's completely new enough to explain that this is how you move your chair up and down. This is what a handbrake does. Again, that doesn't get taught when you're doing your 40 hours. That's something you learn on the job, and a hands-on approach. So I remember I was kind of told that part, as soon as you pass your part two, get your get your part three going as well. It'll take you a few months to get there. So I got my part three in October. Touch wood, it all went well. Not that I felt it went well. It all went well on that day. I remember there was a 20th of October, and it's where the way I kind of went into it, I was thinking, okay, don't have a plan. I've started reading lots of different things. If you have a plan, the more it's going to go out the window. So I did just that. I had a 2-hour lesson with a pupil. First hour we kind of worked on sort of roundabouts and made a mistake around finding a safe gap when entering or when approaching a roundabout. So that's what we're going to work on. Great, we've got something to do. Coming into the test centre, explain to the examiner, pupils on board, done the risk management stuff. Brilliant, let's go and let's have a crack at this. Along the way, we kind of then hit some curbs, had some speeding issues, and couldn't keep the car in a straight line. I thought she just had a few shots of vodka beforehand or something while I was in the test centre. But it's one of the things. I thought, I've got to try and do something here just to adapt to this. Or just speak to her for 5 minutes, find out what's going on, because I think she looked more nervous than I did. So just to calm her down, this is about me. Examiner's there to look up to make sure that actually, for my learning and development, that you're getting the best out of a lesson I could provide. Through that was that 40 minutes went so quickly. Back at the test centre, and then got some great news. It's almost like finding out if you've ever had anyone have this sort of feeling if you're at school, you've got your GCSE results, or you've got your A-level results, or just kind of waiting there for 20 minutes, finding out what they're going to come back with. And it's almost like the exam was really nice, and but it's just a straight face. I just don't get the straight face. Like how can you keep that to yourself for that long and not say with a straight face? I remember. I also so happy. I remember hugging the examiner. I was I was just always teary eyed and hugged him, and it's great. And I didn't know what to do then. And that's when the journey really started, to be honest. I think I made more mistakes after I got my part three than I did beforehand. Just because you kind of think, I'm top boss now. I've done this now. I know everything about driving instruction. This is great. This is, I could not be happier. I remember telling this to family members and friends. Any questions, come to me. I'm your man. Soon get humbled very quickly. When you get a few difficult pupils, difficult in the fact that it was difficult for me to get across, not because they were being difficult themselves. It was just that communication, understanding what one thing works for one doesn't really work for the other. Adjusting the pace. Some people find different paces and things like that, where one size doesn't fit all. But that's the approach I was taught, if I'm honest with you. Try this, try that. Have a bank of faults. I think was one of the things that I was looked at. Where's your bank? Your fault bank. Think about all the faults that could happen. Think about the remedial. Think about passing the responsibility on. Okay, cool. Well, I do all that stuff. Great. But actually, when you're sitting next to someone that's in charge of your safety as well as theirs, you've got to kind of, I suppose, break the script a little bit, and you've got to go outside that box and go, okay, hold on. Clearly, this is something's not right here. How can I support you to be a better driver, or how can I support you to be more skillful in this area? What do you think? How does that sound? Shall we work together? It's a partnership. It's a tag team partnership. You can't do one without the other, and you can't. Yes, you've got to lead them because you are not necessarily the more knowledgeable one there, but you're there as a coach to get the best out of them. And if you can't get the best out of them, that's something I started to learn quite quickly that I didn't have that skill set of doing that. So in I don't mind saying, so I'm in sort of the southeast of England, so down sort of Kent way. Started searching around for courses. Who can offer me things to help me get better, develop myself? CPD was something new. I think actually, wow, God, they do CPD in this industry. Brilliant! I didn't know that. I thought they only exist in corporate structures. But through that, in terms of actually found Bright Coaching for Stuart. So currently enrolled into the course. I always got to check the full name for this. Yeah, so professional development diploma in coaching and behavioural change for safe driving. So on that, so I thought, you know what? Well, that's not. Why not? Let's go Scotland. Let's go see Stuart and his team, and they're all lovely. But yeah, I embarked on that journey in July last year. Module 4 is coming up next week, so that'll be interesting. But yeah, there's some of the things that you start understanding what you are not doing. It opens your eyes, and it's really scary in terms of not understanding your pupils and letting them in, letting them drive with you 50 miles per hour where anything could happen. That's a lot of responsibility, and you have to understand the risk assessment that you have to do personally to let someone else take control of your life. That was never the message at that part 3 stage. So I think a lot of eye openers, but through that, also I found in terms of Bright Coaching. However, there's so many different resources, companies that are available now, probably more up sort of north of England rather than south, which kind of offer that kind of training. So it's just I've had to venture out further up, away from my comfort zone, away from family, spending a few days, and that time and money commitment is also a key factor. But it's well worth it if you want to do this for the right reasons. If you're after picking up some loose change and getting people through the test quickly, actually, I think you've got to really think about why you're doing this. It's made me think that's not many jobs offer you the revenue or the turnover that this occupation does. So it comes with responsibility, and you can't. It's not really an easy way out of it because you have your standards check coming out, then they'll kind of fish you out. I had to make a joke about the fishing you out with the fish tank in the bank. But yeah, it's one thing. You've got to invest time and the effort. I think that's something I learned, which took a while. It took probably about 6 to 7 months to really understand that it doesn't stop here. But yeah, that's kind of the journey that I kind of had over that sort of February to October, and then from October to now. And you learn, you make mistakes along the way, really. So I've kind of given you verbal diarrhea there, Josh. I hope you're still awake through that.
Well, episode done. Thank you for listening. See you all later.
So
that was great. Yeah, that was some journey that you took us on there. And I loved it because what's interesting is you passed everything first time. Yeah. And yet you were still seeking development, which I find really interesting because I didn't pass part 1 first time, nor did I pass it second time. And I didn't pass my part 3 first time either. And the fact that I'd had a few fails left me questioning, well, what more do I need to know? What more is there? But I'm not sure I'd have done what you did had I have just got through everything first time. I'd have maybe had the approach that you said once you pass. I'm the guy. I've passed. I'm a driving instructor, and fair play for getting on and developing and realizing that there is so much more to this industry that well, you can't realistically get into it if you're basing your PDI training on 40 hours. Like there's just no way in that time frame you can delve deep enough to what we need to be doing.
Absolutely. It You've got to read around the subject, or read around it, or listen to it. I'm not a big book lover, so I struggle reading things. I like from a visual format point of view. But just going back to you said about the reason why for development, it's because when at that point when I did have I think four fails in a row, and I thought thinking what am I doing? So yes, from a I suppose tick box exercise point of view, it was done. However, if there's something missing with pupils that I'm not picking up, that's what it was. I think so. The first three that I had there were fails from a test point of view, from a learner test point of view, which then made me question my ability around. Okay, I've definitely not done something here, or yeah, this is my fault. Taking a bit of accountability for it because I think you have to. You wanna celebrate successes, but you've got to understand what the reason for failure was. I mean, and it's hard to look yourself in the mirror and go, yeah, that was kind of probably my fault, actually. I could have spent more time doing that. Rather than having that joke around, cyclists or people overtake, I probably could have then maybe made a really good point around, okay, what do we do around here? Check understanding knowledge and the application side of things. Because it's a chat, isn't it? When we're in the car with people, it's a chat. And a lot of people, build that rapport up with you. They start trusting you, and sometimes you're entitled to privileged information. So you've got to be very careful and just bring it back to that professional side. And I think makes you realise those things.
I think that can get overlooked at times, that it is a conversation that we're having with our pupils. We're not, I don't know, maybe it's controversial, maybe it's not. We're not looking for a set question. Like, what question should I ask here? It's, you said it, it's, we're a tag team. It's teamwork in the car. And what I find interesting was you said that, I can't remember the exact words, along the lines of client centered, and it's maybe a bit watered down, or you're not sure we are client centered. But then when you went on to describe the lessons and how it's not one size fits all and you need to adapt to the client, I'm almost sat here thinking that is client centered. You're putting your client at the center of that learning environment, and you're tailoring whatever they need to them at that moment in time.
Yeah, so I suppose in that respect, you're looking at because you've had that discussion, you can find that particular need out. It's not given to you in a platter. So when you start off that lesson or that lesson planning, so it's the stages you have an idea, or the pupil brings something to the table. This is what I reflected on the last session. This is what I want to work on. What level of support do you want? And then the pupils, and if you, and again, not one size fits all, but not all pupils are the same. So some are a little bit more forceful. Right, this is what I want to do this lesson, and that's it. Right, okay. So then trying to find that skill of right. So this is what you're going to work on. You start to question more and more. So as soon as you start mentioning, well, I suppose you should have mentioned the client-centered part too. Maybe the pupil themselves. Maybe it's something that you keep to your chest closer. But then that way you can use that when you need to, because you do get. I'm paying you money to teach me how to teach. This is what I want to learn today. Let's go. Okay. All right. Fine. Let's carry on doing that. And I think this is the thing where it's quite controversial. Some instructors may be charging X amount. That's the standard rate for cost and everything else. But to someone that's working 9 to 5 in a job that doesn't pay you, I suppose, generous amount per hour, that means money means a lot to them. So they want to get things done from their side, and I think that's what you've got to understand. You've got to manage the expectations. So you have to manage expectations before you get to adapting them, because they're going to be on the defensive side a little bit. I think that's what I found in terms of. Well, I find one of the modules from private coaching is around sort of those contracts, are your learning contract, what to expect from your lessons, what's your objectives, what do you expect from the lessons, how it's delivered, what's my responsibilities, what's your responsibilities, and actually can we see each other on the same page? And I think if that's not established, and that's where I think the client centered, it can get difficult if it's not explained in the right way. Hope that makes sense if that going through that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I fell into, I think, what you were saying. Um, and I don't know if I mentioned it in one of my standards check blogs that I did, but I was becoming client led. So I'd get the people in, oh, what we're working on today. And the client would say, I want to do this. Okay, who's going to do what? How are we going to go and do it? Um, and just going doing that. And then mistakes had come in and I'd have to step in and then we'd have to take a step back. And that was part of my training that I'd done with Tom Stenson. And I had a light bulb moment talking with him. I'm like, I'm being pupil led. Like they're coming out and I'd gone way too far over the what do you want to do today? Okay, great. How do you want me to help you? All right, let's go and do it. And I'm having to take back more responsibility and guide the learning because, like you said, we are not the leader, or we're not trying to put ourselves above a pupil. But generally speaking, we do know a little bit more about the subject than what a learner does. And there are going to be times when what they want to do is not realistic. And like what you said, we've got to manage those expectations. And since that training, it has made a difference where sometimes I'd maybe, but okay, are you sure you want to go and do that? Yeah, yeah. And there's part of me that's like, well, it's going to go wrong. And then we'll pick up the pieces when it does go wrong. And it's like, again, you've mentioned it, is that within the risk assessment? And yeah, of course it is. I'm not going to put me or the pupil in danger, but does that need to happen to create an effective learning environment? And
Yeah.
it is such a challenge and finding where we're at. But that's been one of my changes, is having the confidence that we know what we're doing and what's needed. We maybe don't know why. We don't understand our people's thoughts and how they feel about certain things. But we know if someone's coming into roundabouts too quick that something has to change. We can't keep doing that because it's going to become dangerous and then we're increasing the risk. Client centered, client led. How are we supposed to do it? What a challenge this job is, eh?
Because you're right, 'cause then it switches it, doesn't it? You go from, you've got to be that authority figure in the vehicle when it's a safety critical situation. You've got to understand that you've got to step in that moment. But then I strongly believe that prevention is better than the cure. Or if you can prevent something from happening, why wait for it to happen and then trying to fix it and just to prove a point, I suppose. And this is something I actually was when I was preparing from part of the I had to understand, because I'm thinking, well, I've got to let them make the mistake for me to then to fix it, right? No, you don't. Um, you've got to understand how does their brain work? What do they map out? What do they see? Sometimes you see these pictures where, do you see a hat or see a duck, or if you see something else, everyone sees the world very differently. So I think, yeah, it's what we do. It changes from people to people, and where you lead someone, and where if you're people led, or if you've got to understand where the line is. I think that's where I've always heard this: there's a place for instruction, there's a place for this. And you think, okay, then what do we do? Then what does a standards check allow us to prove? Because actually, is that what you're doing? And that's a different subject. I won't get into too much into that side.
That's exactly why I requested one and got it done. So what's going on in my head, I know that it works on a standards check and it's what the DVSA expects from us. And yeah, that was one of the reasons for exactly like we're discussing now, because you can end up so deep in social media and you've got all of these trainers. And I mean, even just my podcast, like if you was to go back through every episode, 74, 75 episodes, whatever we've got now, the underlying message might be very similar, but the way it's explained or the way it's sold is appearing to be different. So as a PDI with all of that information, you're like, well, which one's right? Which one should I be doing? How do I manage this? And it's such a challenge to find what is right when everyone's got slightly different takes on it. Again, coming back to that perception, what a learner sees coming up to a roundabout, we're going to have a different perception of it. And there's trainers that are going to have a different perception of the same publication that's in front of us potentially. And I feel for PDIs that do stumble across all of the content, because where do you start and how do you make sense of it?
Well, I think you touched on there. There's so much information available, and again, there's the underlying. There's a lot of accurate information available, but then proceed in different ways. So it's not wrong. It's not right. But it's what works. I think is the best way. Um, a simple example, really basic example I can think of is just in the reverse bay parking. Do you do the 90-degree method? Is it 40-degree, 45-degree method? Or actually just find a bay and you park in it? Which one is it? They're all correct. They'll both get you the same outcome. But which way do you follow? And I think that's when you start to go on socials, you start to see so much information. Which one actually has any substance behind it, and then who do you reach out to, and what do you want to get from it? I think that's the main thing. What do you want to get out of the information that you're searching for? Because it's very hard to just go blind into it, and you can be open-minded, but you've got to have a purpose for what you're looking for. But yeah, it's being qualified coming up to 2 years, it's I've seen a lot of changes in terms of my own attitude. I think it comes from within, from just understanding how your diary works, what your working hours are, to what you can handle as a human being. It's a tough gig. I don't think it's an easy occupation to get into. The mental strain, the mental drain that you do get from a long day being in the car. Sometimes I feel like I'm driving on the left side of the road because you're always sitting in that passenger seat. So actually, you've got to be able to stay awake, see things early as possible, and your mind will start going. Mind will go places and quite dark places quite quickly because you're going for the same roads, same area. It's mundane. You teach this, you coach or you teach this to your pupils. Don't get complacent. Just because you know the area and there's never a car coming out of that exit from that roundabout. One day there might be. So I've had it before, which you've got to take your breaks. Even it's quite embarrassing actually, but I don't mind viewers understanding. A lot of instructors go through this, but just having toilet breaks in between lessons. Oh my god, that was a culture shock change for me. Wow.
I had a tantrum the other day. I rung Craig, the guy that I work with. We was having a chat, and I pulled up at the petrol station. I'm just going to run into the toilet, and I'll give you a call back. And I stood waiting at the toilet for 15 minutes, and whoever was in the toilet hadn't come out, and there was only one. And I'm looking at my watch. I'm going to be late for my lesson. What do I do? Do I wait another 15 minutes? And the struggle was real. And in the end, I'm like, do you know what? I don't need it that much. I'm going to get across to my students. I'm now late for my learner. And I told her I'm running late. I'll deduct half an hour off. So next week, just pay for the 1 hour. And I was so annoyed with this person that had sat in the toilet for 15, 20 minutes because there wasn't another one between there and my learner. But that is one of the biggest challenges. And do you know what? Health wise, is probably one of the biggest risks for driving instructors.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I suppose in terms of my job took me to the doctors. That's probably that way. Just because you get scared. I suppose you get anxiety about going to the bathroom. It's weird because you think if I drink now, I don't know how long this is going to last me. Um, so you think, okay, my mouth is dry. I've got to talk. I've got to deliver his lessons. Right, where's my nearest toilet? And you think, okay, I can't take another sip. Or I know some people react to coffee differently in the morning. So as soon as they take a cup of coffee, half an hour they've got to go to the toilet. Um, you're in the middle of a trial lesson. You can't just go to people holding up, be back in a minute. 15 minutes later, you're still waiting outside. Um, but yeah, it's these things no one ever told me about. Yeah, well, the health risks, I suppose, and from just I suppose like I mentioned earlier, accident prevention team. Just because you're doing that, and you've got to think about your health, and you'll think about how you to, are you now in a space to deliver lessons? Because if you're worried about, okay, I need to hold wherever you got to hold in. Actually, are you paying attention to that roundabout or that road that we need to be? We know that there's lots of accidents happen because of observations. So things like that, I think it's we learn from ourselves, and it can be funny retrospectively, but in the time, yeah. I mean, if you're waiting 50 minutes and you had no choice, you've got to find some trees somewhere. Bushes. Where are they? But yeah, I think it's just finding simple things, how to manage your own diary, understanding how much time to allow for, I suppose, travel time between lessons, even lesson planning, or just understanding, what the reflection log from the previous lesson looks like, so you're prepared. Mistakes. One of the things I made, and I tried doing 5 or 6 lessons in a day once, just because the day was great. It was hot, sunny. Started at 7 o'clock, finished the last lesson at I think 8, just gone past 8. Which is great from financially, it's very rewarding. But I think the toll it has on your body and strain, it'll affect you for the next day. So, really time yourself, and time yourself in terms of the lessons. Some people love. I always do 2-hour lessons or an hour and a half, depending on capability and ability. People's fatigue. I never had 2-hour lessons when I was learning. It was 1 hour, and that's it. But actually, you got to understand what's right for the people and what's right for you. So I always now leave probably a half an hour gap between lessons for travel time and also toilet breaks as well. Very important. And petrol stations are so clever. They market things so well, because if you go into a petrol station, you're not just going there for a wee. You're coming up with a pack of Haribos and probably a drink. Um, Keep you going for the rest of the day.
I think that's the next challenge as well, isn't it? It's diet. I mean, I am quite strict. I say quite strict. I basically just fast until 12, 1 o'clock. I don't eat because if I eat in the morning, then I'm hungry. And where am I going to go for food? Well, it's going to be a petrol station and it's going to be a meal deal. Or my go-to thing half the time is like the bag of chocolate, the mini eggs or the M&Ms, just some sugar. And that'll do for an hour. But then you're crashing afterwards and you're like, I've got another lesson yet.
Yeah.
So that is such a big thing because we're dehydrating ourselves so that we don't need to go to the toilet. When we do need to go to the toilet, we're holding it in because we're on a lesson. And then we want food. Well, we're probably not going to get a nice, healthy salad from the local BP garage because
Probably
how are
not.
we going
No.
to eat that in the car without making a mess? So we can grab a chocolate bar or a bag of Haribo. So we're dehydrated, yet we're holding in the toilet. and we're eating very unhealthy food throughout the day that's just kind of grab and go. Yeah, this isn't in the 40 hours, is it?
No, it's not. No, forget the step counts. I think the only steps sometimes you take. I won't even go into my step count per day. It is atrocious. Just because the only walking you're doing from is the driver's side to the passenger side, around depending on how wide your car is. By the time you come home, right? Where's the sofa? Where's my pint of beer or whatever you like to have in the evenings, and you just want to chill out for the evening. And then you get going again, 6 o'clock in the morning again. So that's definitely an interesting thing that you don't doesn't get picked up, but how to look after yourself whilst doing this job.
It's been, I feel really bad because it's been mentioned more than a handful of times on the episodes. And I do when I'm having this conversation, I'm like, yeah, I need to be more disciplined. And to be fair, I do fast and I don't really eat sugary food now at lunchtime. If I have to eat while I'm out on the road, it is a meal deal and it's a wrap, a fruit smoothie, and a fruit pot. And it's not good because, well, how do the smoothies stay fresh for so long? There's so many preservatives in them, along with the wrap, and the fruit's probably not natural fruit anyway. But I'm going off on a
Yeah,
tangent with that. I try to be disciplined and I try to get in the gym when I can. But it's so hard because you hit your routine. And I think it comes back to what you mentioned as well. Like when I see a gap in my diary, it's like, do I want to earn 40 odd pound an hour for that gap, or do I want to go home and make myself a nice lunch? And it's like, well, the mortgage isn't going to pay itself.
exactly. I think that discipline you've got to have a good balance, and so I suppose some of the frustrations that I found after going through the qualifying process, you kind of then think about, okay, how is it really affecting me? So I mentioned to you beforehand, like just understanding how the financials work from a HMRC point of view. Great, I've got earning £40 an hour, fantastic. That's not what you're actually earning. What's not once you understand that's your turnover. That's not what you're actually making from that particular lesson. Understanding that actually, what does it mean to earn and to understand what your costs are, your general day-to-day trading expenses. And then you get a lovely bill from your accountant or your HMRC. Oh, by the way, you've got to pay tax for next year earlier as well, half of it. Oh, do I? Oh, that's news to me. So, yeah, that really impacted, I think, the first part year. Part tax year that I'd done mine. I wasn't expecting it. So actually, you've got to be really on the ball with it from day one. And not many accountants specialize in driving instructors. So you do have the ones that you see on these in terms of conferences, and but that's one or that's two. Well, where's my local one in Kent, or where's my local one in the southeast of England? So I think when you're understanding what to expense and what not to expense, a lot of people then take that on themselves. To, I can do it myself. But actually, it's worth getting professional expertise, at least for the first few years, so you understand what you get yourself into. And yeah, it's one thing that seems simple, but actually, it's you've got to take time to understand how it works and make sure that you've got a plan on how you handle your money and your finances. Especially if you're taking block bookings. What do you've got the money in advance? Great. What other job pays you in advance? It's not yours until you've earned it. How do you manage that? So it's just taking time to understand, how you understand your income. What do you do with your income? And if anyone that's never been self-employed before is great, but I came from an employed background for the last 2 decades. So yeah, all new to this. Pensions, share schemes, and Bupa Health, all that stuff supposed to come lovely and inclusive with your employment package. Yeah, it doesn't come. Doesn't come straight away with everything when you're a driving instructor being self-employed. I need to find out what those individual costs are personally. Then you start thinking, okay, you know what, I've really got to get myself in gear. So I think frustrations around no one makes you aware of that. So as much as it's understanding how to learn to be a driving instructor, it's important to understand what are the implications of being self-employed. What do you have to think about? Life insurance, critical illness insurance for your home if you want to mortgages. What does your income protection look like if you're the sole breadwinner on an income that is not certain? Is probably the best word to use, because it is stable. Because as long as we're busy, it's great. But it's only great until you are healthy and fit. It takes you to hold your wee in for 2 months, go to the doctor, then actually you're out for a week and a half because you didn't go to the toilet when you should have done. Wow, and you've lost weeks and a half worth of income, and that could set you back. So don't learn the hard way. Really plan and budget ahead. I think it's a frustration, but it's a massive learning curve for me going on that really.
The finances, I was quite fortunate because I transitioned into this. So I was salaried and I'd done this part time. And then I filled a day a week until I could transition into it. And yeah, the finances, I mean, I've not got a big pot of money. If I have to take more than a few weeks off at the minute, I'm in trouble. But the way I've always managed it has always been structured. So from
Hmm.
a business account to a personal account. So block bookings or anything like that are not much of a concern. But yeah, finance, the tax and accounting is where I come unstuck, which is why I just pay an accountant. I'm
Yeah.
probably one of his best clients. I send him the spreadsheets. He tells me what I need to pay. I pay it. Job done.
Okay.
But yeah, so accounts, I'd say I'm fairly happy with, but that's just because I pay someone to deal with it. Admin is not it's not my strong suit. Running a business is hard enough. I mean, getting clients, maintaining clients, marketing yourself. I've not got time to be trying to figure out tax and everything else. I'd rather someone who knows what they're doing. You deal with that. I'm going to try and keep earning work to pay you to deal with my paperwork.
That's it. You specialize in what you've got to specialize in, not into other things. It's time consuming as well. That's the thing. It's time consuming. Um, I think when I first started, I had Excel spreadsheets going. I thought, brilliant, I'm a spreadsheet man. But yeah, it's very quickly catches up. End of the week catches up with you. So I still use I use personally Total Drive to handle my lessons and those kind of expenses, just because it makes it easier for me to personally to understand. And I like graphs and charts and what does that look like. So, but yeah, it's a busy job, and you need your me time. With anything, you need your me time, and that's very very important. And one of the things I love about this job is I'm into my cars. I love my cars. Always had nice, like, to be fair, nice German cars, which is great. So it's quite, when I transitioned to this job, I I had to go for reliability, and Toyota was the place to go. Um, but yeah, I think if you love driving, or if you have that enthusiasm, that's where your passion and your expertise kick in, helping people learning how to drive, because you can then they get excited about little things, little buttons that are little cubby holes in the cubby places in the car. How many cup holders a particular vehicle has. So it's just great things like that where, I think I suppose to speak to anyone that's not a car enthusiast, think, oh, why are they getting excited about this button in this car, or the suspension can increase in height, decrease in height. So yeah, I think it's one of the things that, when you have, I'm just going back, bringing it back to sort of finances, and you've got to leave the specialist where the specialist can do things for you, and you can focus on what you love to. Really important. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I like my cars and I do toy with the idea of getting the car I want and teaching in that. And I keep looking and I'm like, no, that's not a practical teaching car. Let's stick with the Ford. And when I make enough, I can have a toy. At the minute, I stick with a motorbike. But there's good sides of it being a business. like the car is a business asset, the fuel that you're putting in is tax deductible, the insurance is tax deductible. And that's where I see the benefits of this. Like when I wasn't a driving instructor, I still had to pay for a car, I still had to tax it, I still had to put fuel in it, I still had to insure it. Whereas now, well, it's all a business cost. We've got a private car as well, which unfortunately isn't a business cost. No matter how many times I try and ask my accountant to make it one, it doesn't work. It's not allowed. Um, but it's understanding how much it costs to run a business. Like you said, you've got to pay for your health insurance, or your life insurance at least, and then you've got pension. Are you paying into a personal pension? All of that kind of stuff. I'm not. I need to do something because I never stayed in the military long enough to get my full pension. And that then all should, in theory, trickle down to the price that you're charging that client per hour once you've taken everything into account based on how much you need to earn.
Yeah. And, yeah, I think, and that can be kind of, then it's, I suppose again, it gets you back to reality of the true cost of what your earnings are. Uh, and then that's what you've got to work with more than anything else. Actually, it just going to think about things, the one thing, the things I learned, and I get quite passionate about this, and I think it's because I care. I absolutely care. So one of the frustrations I've had since I've ever started doing this is that I am. When a pupil goes to a test centre and they pass, it's great. You know, we're dancing or singing, it's great. I've got this thing where we go to. There's a McDonald's right near my test centre. We go in there for a bit of a victory drink together. It's on the house, and yeah, it's a great because they're buzzing. They're absolutely buzzing. So are you. It's all great. It's great. It's fantastic. Even if the sun's not out, it's cloudy. It is shining in the car. But unfortunately, when people doesn't go their way, it's quite horrible. And that drive back from the test centre because they're going through emotion. To be fair, there's nothing really you can say. Well, personally, there's nothing really I can say to them that's going to make the situation any better. You've got to give them time and space. And that's what I think I mentioned about in terms of, when someone doesn't come out with the outcome that's expected or they want, it gets quite difficult for them to kind of pick themselves up. Almost to the point of like, to people, some of the people that you teach yourself, they've almost kind of given up. So you've got to kind of keep that going. What's the next plan? And that works great with some people. Some people are like, you know what, I just want to stay quiet and just take me back home, please. So that really gets under my skin where, you want everyone that takes your test to be 100% pass rate. They're flying, they're safe drivers, great. But you do need to understand that it can get frustrated, and you're allowed to be frustrated. I think a lot of people think you can't be frustrated, can't be annoyed. It's good. It's good to be out there rather than being inside your mind all day. So I think it's frustrating that no one else stands to understand your own personal emotional intelligence, yet alone someone else's. Because obviously the people's feeling, but you're feeling for the people. It's it's someone that you've coached, spent time with, you care about them. Unfortunately, it's not just a business transaction. If you're spending 60 hours with someone in the car, you built a rapport, you built a trust and a bond there, and you want to follow that through. And if you can't follow that through, you want to do more. But I think even when they're on the test, I've had it where I've not sat in the back of the vehicle, and I'm getting anxious. And then test center, I'm walking up and down, seeing if they're here yet. What's the time now? Are they going to be back soon? It's a horrible feeling. And as soon as they're arrived, you kind of then go around the car ready for that debrief, and the people looks at you and goes, "Like, I've not done it." Well, no, I will say that before you say anything, let the examiner speak first, and let them tell you what the result is. But yeah, it's almost like they're shut off. They can't remember the last 40, 30 minutes. So it's really, really important to, I suppose, not to get too involved, but there's a place for caring. There's a place where you've got to stay that professional side of things as well, because there you can't then not, I suppose, be sulking with them, if that makes sense. You need to be okay. You know what? This is not the end of the world. You gave it a good go. Well done. Right, what should we do next? Has this motivated you to come back? And you know what? This time around, I want to see how can I get a clean sheet? Can I go in and really give this a good go? So you've got to motivate them in the right place and carry on. You can't just give up because that's the place. But you've got to give them that time and space, which very hard to do sometimes because there is that bond there is that rapport there. But it's something that you find out on the job. And no one goes for that with you because a lot of the time it's and I've seen different instructors do it. So jump in the car, drop you back home. Cool. Okay. Well, there's no. Where's the human interaction? We are humans at the end of the day. What does that look like? So, and I think this is where things like talking about it on some these platforms with yourself. You've got to understand the majority. There's a lot of instructors that probably don't have that that kind of what's the words now? But I suppose don't have that kind of understanding of the pupil or understanding of themselves because no one done it for me, and why should I do it for someone else? But that's a skill. That's a skill that you have to attain and understand, which takes a while. It takes a while.
Driving test fails are definitely difficult, and I've still not found a way to deal with it. And I guess it comes back to the same way I do my lessons. It depends on the person. I know some of the fails that I've had, they don't really want me to say anything. You can just tell that it's like they just need, like you say, that time and space. Others need reassurance, and it's like it's okay, it's fine. I failed my first driving test, and I failed my second driving test, and here I am now as a driving instructor. So it's probably my fault anyway. But try and build them up that it's not the end of the world. But then the other side of a driving test, which I don't know, it always feels a bit weird when they pass and you drop them off at home and you're like, see you later. And then off you go. And on one part, you're like, oh, might see them again, might never see them again. Now I've got to fill the spot because I've got bills to pay.
Well, yeah, that's a bit of emptiness there, isn't there? When you've got to say goodbye. Yeah, it's strange. And you said about in terms of an empty space, and I'm thinking about right. How do we look at maybe post test session? What does your post test look like? Let's go through a motorway using your car, your phone. Not everyone has CarPlay, Auto Android. You've got to use a phone holder. How do you handle distractions? And I think that's the thing. Sometimes you've got pupils passing within 40 hours, 60 hours. I've had over 100 hours. Some pupils. It's again that just scratches the surface. Doesn't look at the intricacies of driving maybe on the motorway at night, which you'll never get to do on a lesson. Driving in sort of longer distances. What does their fatigue actually look like? One thing I do incorporate in the lessons now is for them to drive back and come to work. What does that feel like on a busy 5 o'clock coming back, or in the morning with the school run? And let's pretend we're taking the kids to school, and you've got to now shoot off to work. What does that look like? How do you handle it? What kind of emotions do you go under? What kind of things do you see? So there's a lot of the things about post-test, and that's got my mind thinking about what as instructors we can offer after that test. I don't think motorway driving or advanced driving, as some people, I think the past syllabus doesn't cover the practicalities of things that you normally would do as when you pass your test. Because I remember, I think the first thing I'd ever do when I passed the test was drop my dad off to work. And that drive felt scary on the way back when he wasn't in the car. It's like, okay, now I'm definitely by myself. There's no other person in this car that will make that decision. It's so important. But yeah, I think when you're saying bye to them, it's something you've got to be proud of yourself. Adds to your success as an instructor. But also in terms of that, it helps with your triggers as well. If you're concerned about your triggers around serious faults, examiner taking actions, because that's important. We need to understand our role and have accountability of what we're doing and to best of our ability. So having sight of that is really, really important, but not to start to give yourself extra anxiety that you'd be called for a standards check and you're panicking over everything. So, but it's important to understand where your place is in that as well, isn't it?
I did. I got my data report from the DVSA in build up for my standards check, and that made for interesting reading because I could see where the faults were generally kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, grouped together. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. And it's then had me reflecting on my lessons, and is it something that I'm not doing, or what's going on with that? So getting your data from the DVSA, I think, does make for an interesting read. And yeah, post test, I mean, I offer all of my learners, like, if you ever need anything, get in touch. And I mean, I've had a few people take that offer, and I tell them on the first hour-ish, I'm not going to charge. If you want a long, like, trip to Bristol and back, we're going to have to charge something, but the first hour will be free. And I've got one, I mean, it'll be all dealt with when this goes out, that's going for a motorway lesson. Now, on the lessons, we went on the motorway. I'm in Swindon. Like, we can be on the motorway from pretty much anywhere in Swindon within about 15 minutes. So everyone, before they go to the test, gets to go on the motorway for a period of time. But they've just lost their confidence since passing. Now they're on their own. And we've got that. I had someone else who just couldn't make sense of a junction, and everyone was doing something different. And he was messaging me and trying to describe it. I'm like, well, why don't we? I've got some time tomorrow evening. We'll nip out for half an hour and we'll go and have a look at the junction. So I do try and still keep the door open for pupils if they ever need anything, because people do, they lose their confidence. They might have a small bump and want to get out and just build their confidence again. It's it's a strange job. We're invested in someone, like you said, for 60, 80, 100 hours in some cases. They pass the driving test and you're like, oh, good luck. See you later.
Yeah, it's yeah, that is definitely, it's a strange feeling. Proud moment, but it's definitely a strange feeling there. But it's one of the things. I think one of the things that you kind of enjoy about the role is that taking someone from perhaps newly in the vehicle, getting them all the way to where they're a safe driver, and you're kind of glad they're on the road. You know, you see enough people on the road that shouldn't be on the road. So you know, you're adding something that's some bit of good into the road, especially with all the hazards now. Not, I suppose, not, and this is what I explain to my pupils, is the way driving was 10, 15 years ago. It's completely changed. From, you know, think about the increased hazards from, you know, you've got um, increased number of mopeds for like Uber deliveries or Just Eat deliveries, and wow, and majority of them are the learners themselves. You've got Uber drivers. Again, there's, you know, I've had been in Uber myself where I've got to tell the driver to slow down. You're going above the speed limit. That's my instructor coming out. But yeah, you know, they're driving 40 and 30. Like, what are you doing? You're in charge of my safety. You know, you've got e-scooters milling around everywhere that shouldn't be around. And you know, it's cars have got bigger. You know, I learned in a Peugeot 206 when I learned, and now you're in sort of big, you know, Hyundai Konas, you're in the Yaris Crosses, and the cars that you kind of buy, you might get bigger little 4x4. So things have changed, but you know, the main markings are still the same size. So you know, the impacts of infrastructure and development through the car industry, that also impacts the way that you are on the road. And you know, things like buses, and today some locations have trams now as well. You can't cover everything, but you've got to give them the best tools to better deal with those situations. and realization of that, and that's like I'm using Stuart's word. So now that shifting that paradigm around, it's not just going out and learning to drive. You'd be done in 20 hours. You've got responsibility. And how does it? It's not only about understanding your the vehicle or mastering sort of traffic situation. It's about how do you understand the social impact of your driving? How do you understand about your the risk assessment of going out at night with friends or staying overnight somewhere, then all of you coming back and you're the driver. You've had the same night. You're probably just as tired as them, but you're the designated driver. So there's a lot to it which we can add to.
We've covered some ground there, haven't we? We've gone
we
from
we
part
have, yeah.
one to post-test driving and yeah, touching on, well, the higher levels of the GDE.
Yeah. But there's so much to it though, isn't it? So it's great. It's great fun looking into those and kind of ciphering through different things and what works for you. And again, I look at myself and that GDE matrix. Do I do all of those probably things? Probably not. I'm still learning myself. Far from it, actually, probably. So yeah, it's if you can get a glimpse of that to your pupils, I think it's wonders, and they really start to understand where you're coming from, just from cultural differences. So I think that's one thing that it makes a big difference of certain individuals driving. In our culture, you don't drive. Why are you driving? What's the point? So yeah, I think it's a lot of things they address. So yes, it's fabulous. But yeah, when I get more times, get more knowledge about it, I'm sure I'll have a great chat with you at that point as well. But still learning myself.
There's so many different avenues, and I love the way we've kind of touched on a lot of different things because you mentioned it before we started filming, and I know it resonated with me, and that was I'll just be a driving instructor. That's going to be pretty easy. One of my thoughts was if I can just learn the highway code, I'm all right. I can teach people how to drive. It's just learn one book and teach it to your learners. And here we are, 4 years later, just still learning every day about a number of different things, whether it's driving, the rules on the road, how people learn, how the pupils perceive things differently and what they're thinking and why they're making the decisions that they are. It's just endless learning. And I never expected it when I decided to send the paperwork off and apply to be a driving instructor.
So I think that's great that everyone's stories are slightly different to why they get into certain positions or certain, especially now in terms of being a driving instructor. I don't think I was 17 at that point thinking, yeah, you know what, one day I'm going to be a driving instructor myself. Never occurred. It just kind of happens through life, and you kind of sometimes you fall into it a little bit. You think, okay, this shouldn't be that hard. Well, okay, this is a new avenue. I quite like this. Let's see what happens with this going forward. But yeah, there's so much, and I sat down maybe a couple of months ago and think, right, I need to. There's so much free CPD or free videos, whether it's podcasts or whether it's videos, whether it's TikToks and things like that. You think it's all you've got to really understand what you want from. I think I said that earlier. You've got to understand what you want to gain from that. I think the biggest thing it's understanding about the skills. We don't coach. We're coaching good behavioural habits, but you can't coach someone if they don't want to. If they're not willing and open to be coached, you've got to explain how it benefits them. What's in it for me? And then I think that's where you get that buy-in. Okay, if I do this, this will make this a lot easier. Great. And that makes, I think, our jobs a lot easier if they understand the buy-in. People by people. I think that's a very old saying, but it's true. Most successful instructors will be the ones that can build that rapport, you can trust, and you feel safe, and you feel like you develop and you gain that knowledge. And you've got to carry that on. That hasn't come just out of thin air. You've worked hard for it, so you've got to keep working hard for it.
It's endless development, isn't it? And there are so many different aspects. You've mentioned it, the course that you're on with Bright Coaching at the minute and Stuart Lockery. There's so many great people in our industry, and coming into it as a PDI, looking at all of these courses is probably going to be overwhelming. So I like what you said. You got to look for what you need, and if we're being completely honest, as a PDI, you need to just be building your skills and find people that are going to help you with that, because you can sit and listen to hundreds of hours of podcast episodes and YouTube videos and all of these Zoom workshops that happen most nights of the week. But that's a lot of information, and there's only so much we can take in. And when you're learning a new job, a new career, and you've got to worry about finances and tax and marketing and social media and how to work with people and how to manage risk in a moving environment while everyone else in that environment is moving, you've got to spin all of these plates, or you feel like you've got to. You don't. You need to pick one or two, focus on that. Don't try and do everything at once, because it's all going to fall apart, and it's a challenge.
I think you summed that really nicely. There's so many plates to juggle, and you choose how many plates you want to juggle. But I think keeping that focus, it's the best thing. Work on something that you can keep working and become really good at it, rather than just touching on everything and going, okay, I'm okay in these subjects because I've read 5 minutes here and there and there. But yeah, like I say, it's that whole journey and the frustrations you do get. It comes with the job. It's part and parcel. I think just anyone that's can benefit from this podcast, just listening to this episode round, just I suppose be better and smarter than what sort of mistakes I've made. And there's that complacency. We get complacent and think, oh, it can't be that hard. I've been driving for 20 years. It's fine. Not an issue. But yeah, you've got to go with it with open arms, and then there's nothing really stopping you, really.
It's a great message. And before we end up down another rabbit hole of complacency,
Yep.
I've got some listeners' questions. Do you mind if we go through some of those?
Yeah, go for it. Hopefully they're not too hard, and I can answer them if I can.
Before we get to listeners' questions, here is your discount code from Knowledgeably Instructor Training. The discount code is MSP10, and that will get you 10% off their client-centered Part 3 and Standards Check in-person award-winning workshop. So that is MSP10 for 10% off. So the first question. This is from Learning to Drive and Lasagna, or Alex Jones. What advice would you give to part one prepping you in hindsight?
Don't just use the applications that are on your iPads or your phones. Really do get into I suppose, in terms of the books. Little and often. You don't have to read the whole thing in one go. It is boring, but you make it learn. I think one of the things we ask our people, don't we? How do you learn best? So that might mean you might every night you do 15 minutes. You might write things down, little notes. You might get I post-it notes for me personally. So little things I'm not too sure about. Write it down. I think I've seen in terms of, I think it was when I was back at school, you got your flashcards. Right, things are flashcards. Just do little and often, get the resources, but just don't rely on the apps. You've got to really understand. It's just not a memory game. In terms of knowing which answer is out of multiple choice. You've got to understand the explanation why, because at part 3 you're going to have to explain it. You're going to have to coach it and teach it. So your preparation for part three comes from part one.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. That's the missing link for a lot of people, I believe. Get the studying at part one. And if you didn't, and you're not yet at your part three, get back to it and do exactly what was just explained then. So the next question, again from Learning to Drive and Lasagna. What event while coaching a student taught you the most so far in your PDI/ADI journey?
What event? Wow.
Hmm.
Okay. I suppose there wasn't actually, well, in terms of event, situational, not in terms of from a conference point of view. I think from a situation point of view, I think it was understanding my own in terms of where I was complacent myself. So I think underestimating the journey journey from becoming qualified to an ADI. You've got to put in the work into it. It just doesn't come like anything. It doesn't come easy. You have to put the work into it. I think the realization I had was that part two, I wasn't the greatest driver that I thought I was. I'm not a Lewis Hamilton driving on the roads. I'm probably his uncle, driving on the roads. Yeah, we kind of knock it down to what it actually is, because we might do things in our careers where we've done that slightly harder. We might have gone to university, done a degree. We've done things harder. This should be easy. But I think it's understanding your own complacency in part two. And I think part three, if I have to go through again, just go out and reach out to people around regarding the training that is available external to your training provider. If you're with a large organization, great, seek out more. Some of the things I've learned now that wasn't in my 40 hours or my 8 hours while I was seeing my trainer. I think you could always learn more. So don't be afraid to reach out to people and then ask for advice. A bit like what she's done today. And actually, I think figure out one of the biggest events to kind of think about is how you handle pressure and your own emotional intelligence. I think that was quite important. I'm a worrier. I worry about a lot of things. So I think worst case scenario, I've got to keep a lid on that. So understanding yourself.
A great answer. So we've got another question, William Marshall. Looking back, when I qualified as an ADI in 2017, do you think the pink badge allows you the time to gain sufficient experience, knowledge, the skills and understanding to do the job? What are your thoughts?
I think my personal thought, I think the 6 months is probably short of a time scale. If I think tests were readily available, I think 6 months is acceptable. But I think to understand any new role and job, you need about 12 months to even start to scrape the surface a little bit. And that's if part threes are readily available. So I think I think it could be longer in terms of, because otherwise people I've seen people applying for I think the third pink license, and some people get it approved, some people don't. It's if you've got to keep applying, it takes your mind away off the learning process because you're worried about not being able to do the job, rather than if you had 12 months or 18 months to qualify. A bit like a course, you've got 18 months to complete this, and you've got to show that you can do it. So that would be that one thing I would change. I think that's something we could improve on.
Yeah, I've definitely got thoughts on that. But we could probably make another episode out of that, and we're not going to tonight. So thank you very much for that answer. Sean, what would you consider the biggest challenge you've faced so far, and how did you overcome it?
Biggest challenge. I think it's managing your pupils' expectations from the beginning. So understand who's involved in that journey, because that's not sometimes your client is not the pupil. Yeah. Your client is not the pupil. So you have someone that's learning, that's your pupil. You have someone that's financing that particular investment in themselves. That could be the parent, could be a family member. And then it could be someone else involved that's looking the benefactor of that particular investment. So and I think that's the biggest thing I had initially was a bit, it set me back was, well, actually, you're teaching my daughter how to drive, brilliant. So how long is it going to take? Okay, well, I've not sat her in the car yet. We have no idea what a skill capable is about. Okay, well, I want it. I'm paying you this much, so I want it done in this time. Okay, it all depends on how your daughter gets on, what her development looks like. What's her her personal drive for doing this? What does she want to achieve herself from a goal perspective? Does she share that same image as you, parent, Mr. Parent? So I think it's being really open and honest to understand who's involved in this particular learning journey. I think I made the mistake of not doing that initially, and then halfway through the journey, you get other parties getting involved, which starts to dilute your rapport with your pupil, and it starts to become a little more difficult to build that back up again. So I think that's one of the things to really manage your client's expectations and your pupils, or anyone's involved in that learning process, and make it very clear from the beginning.
Another great message. Thank you. What's your must-do advice for someone on their last part 3 attempt?
Wow. That seems like a question with a responsibility. That's wow. The obvious answer is there's an obvious answer which I don't think is the correct thing to do. Don't go out and go crazy with CPD, and that might be controversial me saying that on this podcast, but it's because if you do too much of anything is not good for you. So where's your focus? And I think it's more, because I come from a core background. If you've ever heard of something called a SWOT analysis, self-reflection, what are your strengths? What does that look like? What are your weaknesses? What are your opportunities and what are your threats? Now, if your strengths are actually you're really good at managing risk, well, actually let's focus on something that you're not. How can we turn your opportunity to a strength? And what are the threats involving you? And sometimes most of the threats that we have, we are our worst enemies. So I think really reflect on yourself using the SWOT analysis. It would be a great thing to do. And then, like I said, go and get what you need to work on. You don't need to work on everything for your part 3. Go and work on what you need to work on, what you think, or not because you feel like this is going to get you through. Because there's no training in the world that only you can get out of that particular course. So I might go to the same course as this individual. I might think this is great. You might think, oh, actually, I didn't get much from that. So it's all individual. But yeah, I think it comes from self-reflection and try SWOT analysis. If you know how to Google it, it's really good. And there's different forms of that going and elaborating on that as well.
I like that. And I think you covered Stefan's second part of his question. Also, your do not advice. What should they not do?
Yeah, I think first, don't panic. And I think, don't overload information. Too much of everything, too much of most things is not good for you. So, I suppose be specific on what you want to work on. Get as much support from people. I think we rely on these training courses, and they're like these magic wands. Unfortunately, the training might be great. The PowerPoint might be fantastic. But actually, having someone in the car with you and demonstrating and going through that is invaluable. The things that you can, a trainer might sit in the back of your car and see, you won't even realize that you're doing. I had this bad habit of holding a pen because I like to present with pens. So when you're standing in front of different employees or doing a conference, things like that, in my old career, I had a pen. That was my safety net. So same thing I had in the car. I remember my trainer put this over, drop the pen. It's okay. So I'll grab it with the other hand. So I remember he did something a little bit crazy, and then he deliberately lost control of the vehicle, and I had to grab it. And I was too slow to grab it because I had a pen in my hand. So that was quite an interesting learning curve for me. So get back to don't overload yourself on the training side, but get someone back of your car or reach out to get people to come into your car to give you that feedback.
Definitely a great answer. What part, so we've got Nick, what part of your job do you like the most, and what part do you like the least?
So this is me personally, isn't it? So
Yes.
I love the flexibility. I'm able to pick my kids up from school. I'm able to have a good work-life balance, which I never had the privilege of before. And it is a privilege because you do have to work for it. But that is the best part of your work. You are fully in control. As long as you know how to discipline yourself to be in control. So that's the best time. What it gives me personally, from a coaching perspective, it's just the pure journey you go through with the pupil. It's just great to see because you've developed someone from having zero skilled in driving safely to then being passing and being a great member of the whether being on the road and being responsible for themselves. So that's the two things I think are really the best things. I asked for one, but I'll give you two. You said in terms of what part I don't like about the job or the occupation. So I think it's what I said about it. I think one of the things that when I don't have a great day is when some people's fail. I think that's quite hard for me as well, because it gives me a chance to reflect. So that's my threat of people failing. So I think of the opportunity there for me is right. I need to go back and then go back to the drawing board. Not drawing board, but just doing something different. So I think from the hardest days when people fails and that takes an emotion, it triggers your emotional side as well because you're thinking, you know what, I really want to help you get through this. But then you've got to bounce back and show your resiliency through that and what you can do. So yeah, that's the part I don't like. I think now that I've gone accountant, the finance part is probably not the best either. So yeah, really, really be clued on to your costs, your outgoing costs.
Another great answer there. And that is all of the questions that have come in. And thank you very much for going through them. Do you have any kind of final messages that you'd like to share?
I think in terms of for anyone that's either going through the process or even they're a driver instructor themselves or for a number of years, really start talking to each other. Whether that's a wave on the road, whether that is in the test centre, it is a very lonely job when you're in the car. And I think not every area has its local groups. And I think we talked about things when there's instructors that have been around for a number of years might have their own little groups, but there's a lot of PDIs coming through. Whereas do you get time to get together? Do you get time to share the expertise? So I think if you're that person that is in an area that doesn't have a local Facebook group, don't get to talk to anyone, start your own. That's exactly what I did in my area. There were no communication whatsoever for other PDI ADIs. I opened up a group, opened it through the driver instructor groups as well, and you'd be surprised how many people joined. And there's a community created. So I think final message: it work together. There's a place for everyone in this industry, and I think you've got to find your own place or create your own space.
Great final message to end on there. Sachin, thank you very much for the episode tonight and your time. I've really enjoyed the messages that you've shared. It's been great. We've covered some ground.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me on here. So yeah, really, really good. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode. If you did, make sure to give it a share. And a thank you to the show's sponsors, Knowledgeably Instructor Training. You can find all of their award-winning content at www.adikit.co.uk. You could also check out Talking Send with Dr. Julia Malkin, MBE, and that can be found on Facebook with the membership on Patreon. And if you sign up as a member on Patreon, you get access to over 60 videos to help you understand your learners with any additional needs. Thank you.